Yeah, go for it.
So my next book was Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. And this was a fantastic story. So I'm just going to read the back of it for now. Fierce, energetic, humorous. Imagine that William Shakespeare had a sister as wonderfully gifted as himself, but she was not sent to school, had no chance of learning grammar and logic. Before she was out of her teens, she was to be betrothed. She cried out that marriage was hateful, and for that she was severely beaten by her father. She took the road to London, stood at the stage door. She wanted to act. Men laughed in her face. At last, Nick Green, the actor, he took pity on her. She found herself withered and killed herself one winter night.
Oh, no.
Basically, skipping ahead, Room of One's Own lays bare the structure of male privilege, female exclusion, and the effects of poverty and sexual constraint on women's creativity, evoking the spirit of past writers such as Aphra Behn, Jane Austen, Charlotte Bronte, who died at war with her lot, young, cramped, and thwarted.
Okay.
And basically saying, like, every single writer needs to have a room of their own to focus and do their own thing. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it ends with Room of One's Own is one of the greatest feminist polemics of the century. I do not know that word. But yeah, it has so many really amazing discussion points in here. It was 120 pages, but really, really loved reading this.
I didn't realize it was that short.
Yeah.
Because we talked a little bit about it just by text during the month, but it seemed like there was a lot going on and a lot to discuss.
So, like, one part here, going off of what the back describes, like, once more I looked up women in this history of England, found position of, and turned to the pages indicated. Wife-beating, I read, was a recognized right of man, and was practiced without shame by high as well as low. Similarly, the historian goes on, the daughter who refuses to marry the gentleman of her parents' choice was liable to be locked up, beaten, and flung about the room without any shock being inflicted on the public opinion. Marriage was not an affair of personal affection, but of family avarice. Kind of reminds me of our kind of earlier discussion in this podcast, but just really dark things. And this was a book that she found, and she wrote this in the 1920s. Like, she's...
Okay, so for context, this is around the same time as Agatha Christie, for example.
Yeah.
20s and 30s, usually. Yeah, okay.
So she would have been around at that time, writing, seeing like how women are not equal. And the way I put it to you was, I see this as Virginia Woolf's I Have a Dream speech, but for women.
Yeah.
And I cannot think of any better way of putting it. I hope everyone starts calling it that, because that'd be fantastic. But it is a really well done book, and I think a lot of what she's talked about has been improved upon, which is fantastic to see. But it's also sad to see that it's 100 years ago all this was happening, and it kind of goes through her life. She's just at Oxbridge throughout this, and she's at the beginning of the book, she's not allowed into the library even, just because she's a woman and doesn't have like permission from any of the staff members, things like this. So, but she's speaking there, I think.
I have
like
heard
that.
people last year, in 2023, in Northern Ireland, saying things like, there shouldn't be women in this pub, or put them in a section on their own down the back, or something. Like, this is a man's pub. Like, insane things, you know.
Hate things like that. And that's the general idea of it. I'll go ahead and get straight into her I Have a Dream part of it, because this was the part that impacted me the most, and then I'll get into the other things that really stood out to me. So she says, moreover, in 100 years, I thought, reaching my own doorstep, women will have ceased to be the protected sex. Logically, they will take part in all the activities and exertions that were once denied them. The nursemaid will heave coal, the shopwoman will drive an engine. All assumptions founded on the facts observed when women were the protected sex will have disappeared, as, for example, here a squad of soldiers march down the street, that women and clergymen and gardeners live longer than other people. Remove that protection, expose them to the same exertions and activities, make them soldiers and sailors and engine drivers and dock laborers, and will not women die off so much younger, so much quicker than men, that one will say, I saw a woman today, as one used to say, I saw an aeroplane.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically saying, why are women different from men? Let them do everything that a man can. There's no reason not to. I think that was my favorite passage from it.
Yeah, I mean, I firmly believe there's really nothing that a man can do that a woman can't do.
Yeah. And I think a lot of this has changed. I think if Virginia Woolf were alive today, she would look at this and say, we've made a lot of progress. We're not there yet completely, because we still have teachers are a women's job, something like that.
I personally hate all this stuff, as you know.
Yeah.
And I even hate, and I'm always arguing with people about, like, why you buying your daughter, like, a dolly and your son a tool set or something. Like, I hate it. The whole structure of it is indoctrinated from birth. It disgusts me. I'm like, oh, cool, you're raising this 3-year-old to be a stay-at-home mum, basically. Like, I don't understand, you know. Because I wouldn't categorize people by any other thing, by any other physical trait.
Yeah.
I had a discussion recently. It's only semi-relevant, but I'll be very quick about it. A discussion with my salsa teacher. And he was saying, well, other men won't dance with me because they've decided that gender is the trait you're allowed to exclude people on. They would never say, oh, I don't dance with tall people, fat people, unattractive people, people of a different race, gay people, whatever. They potentially might think that, but they would never verbalize it. But with gender, it's perfectly okay to say. And it's a really weird thing. I never think about people. Many times people have said, oh, do you not mind being the only guy here? And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I am. Like, it doesn't occur to me.
Yeah.
I'm just like, here I am with my friends or with my dance group or whatever. It never occurs to me about gender. The same way, if you said, oh yeah, you're the only person with blue eyes here, I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, I didn't notice. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
It is a random trait about people.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, we'll sometimes hear, like, oh, everyone here is wearing glasses except for this person. It's like, okay. It's just an interesting thing to point out, but it's also like, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter any more
glasses.
than, like, you know, oh yeah, you all had toast for breakfast and I had cereal or something. Like, it's just a random thing about you. I don't care, you know?
It's just that, like, oh yeah, I saw this today. Like, cool.
Yeah.
You've done nothing special.
But some people really, they do care about it. And I see this from men and women, by the way. Like, I've seen plenty of non-feminist women as well. And a lot of, you know, well, we should stick with the traditional roles, or, you know, men encouraging patriarchy, jokes, that kind of stuff. Even women saying, well, we do like some of the bits that go with it, and the opening the doors and some of the perks, if you will. A lot of people, I'm very, very, like, I'm always going for strict equality, strict feminism. Do you think that's what she wanted?
I think it's not necessarily as strict as you're putting it. The way I see it is, like, have complete mixture. Why is it not 50-50?
Yeah.
Or at least statistically significant. So, like, sure, 48-52, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, of course.
But why is it 95-5?
Yeah.
Like, that is obviously not going to be the same. I guess I can see, like, oh, wet nurse, like, some people will be more comfortable if it is a woman doing that. But
yes, there's certain things that have to be, but very few.
But then you also have the other side of it. It's like, oh, people feel very uncomfortable if they have a woman pilot,
which is nonsense. Which is
absolutely nonsense.
Insanity.
Yeah. Like things like that. And so one of the things that she argues for here, she says, when the writer uses both sides of his mind equally, one must turn back to Shakespeare then, for Shakespeare was androgynous. And so were Keats and Sterne and Cowper and Lamb and Coleridge. And now she's talking about the way they write, not them as a person.
Of course.
Shelley, perhaps, was sexless. Milton and Ben Jonson had a dash too much of the male in them. So had Wordsworth and Tolstoy. In our time, Proust was wholly androgynous, if perhaps a little too much of a woman. And I'm not entirely what she's saying. And she doesn't define what it is to be so
that's
man
the
or
thing.
woman.
That doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah. But I think what I'm understanding from this is that it is for all people. What they're writing for everyone.
Sure.
So for Shakespeare, it's not going to be like, oh, only the men are going to get this.
Had she read The Taming of the Shrew? Is that one?
So I think that's what she's talking about here. And I think she does get into that a little bit more. And completely agree with that. It should be written for everyone to understand. Of
course.
And talks about, like, how it doesn't make sense in literature that, like, well, men are this way and women are this way. In the fully man version of writing. So she says here, suppose, for instance, that men were only represented in literature as the lovers of women, and were never the friends of men, soldiers, thinkers, dreamers. How few parts in the plays of Shakespeare could be allotted to them, how literature would suffer. That's another just fantastic quote from this, because it's like, yeah, because we just said, like, oh yeah, these women are just... Ophelia is just the one Hamlet loves, and Desdemona is the one that Othello loves. And it's like, yeah, but who were her friends? What does she think? If we did the same thing with the men,
the same thing, yeah,
it would be insane.
It's like what's it called?
They're token.
What's the test, for movies and things?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Well, I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, you know the one I mean. Where it's like, do the women do anything that's actually like a real role, or do they just talk about man and be someone's girlfriend? It's the
Bechdel test. That sounds right.
You would never see that the other way around. No one's ever had to ask that question.
Yeah.
Like, do the men do anything significant in this movie? It's like, yeah, they did all the things,
Yeah. Actually, it does continue. We might perhaps have had most of Othello and a good deal of Antony, but no Caesar, no Brutus, no Hamlet, no Lear. Like, yeah, you know what? Fair enough. So she's really pushing for that in literature as well. And I think that's what's so nice about this book. She has such good ideas and explains them well, but also creates a good chance for discussion with them.
Yeah.
A lot of it is also of the time. So she's talking about like how much control men have over things, and
too much.
It's waned. Yeah, it's waned, but things like sex and its nature might well attract doctors and biologists, but what was surprising and difficult of explanation was the fact that sex, woman that is to say, also attracts agreeable essayists, light-fingered novelists, young men who've taken the MA degree, men who have taken no degree, men who have no apparent qualifications, save that they are not women. Like, these men have so much control even though they know nothing about women.
Yeah.
Which we're still seeing a lot today.
Of course. I am in favor of essentially an androgynous world and like raising our kids to be androgynous. I don't understand why we have like gender roles. I don't understand why clothes are different. Okay, you could argue that like, well, the certain clothes suit women's bodies better than men's. So I take that to a point, and they do look better. But it's just strange to me that we divide so many things by gender. And even as a child, I didn't understand this. When we in school, it'd be like, cool, we're going to have to divide into teams. Boys versus girls, I guess. And I would be like, but why? It doesn't make any sense to me. Why are we like constantly seeing males and females as like so different to each other? I don't understand it at all. And I talked about with this in some previous episodes with Carla, when we've looked at plays, and it's been like, oh, yeah, these people just nagging. Like, oh, my wife, I got to go back to the wife. I was like, well, don't marry her then. Like, but,
yeah.
But why is it always this stereotype of like the men and women being at each other's throats, and like, and you still see it today. I've been in shops where I've seen women complaining like, oh man, they can't buy the right things, they can't do anything, and of course men doing the same thing about, well, you sort of. So I don't understand these weird like stereotypes that men and women are so different, and they should be treated differently, and they have different ideas. Most people want primarily the same things, like your basic needs, and then like to have like a nice life. Most people want money, they want shelter, they want love, they want friendship. I don't think I agree that like men and women are very different at all.
Treat them as people and let them go from there in a way.
Yeah.
Like, I think it would be interesting to see what happened with people if we do not have any of those predispositions.
Yeah.
I think there would still be differences, but
there might be some.
It would be less like, oh yeah, like you're a footballer because you're a boy.
Yeah.
And you're a cheerleader because you're a girl.
I argue with parents when they say things like, well, I didn't force my girl to play with Barbies and my boy to play with Action Man, but it worked out that way. And I'm like, yeah, because they saw ads on TV and they saw other kids doing it. And like, you can't raise them in like a completely gender-neutral environment, unfortunately, So there's always that.
Not unless you get like a penal colony or something.
There's always that stuff going on. It's something I never really understood. I never got why we make a big deal out of it. And of course, it has the thing where then men are treating women almost like children, like they have to look after them and this protect thing. And I think that comes from, you see it a lot in the Victorian books where they were marrying people 40 years younger than them, so that's why.
You've given me a great segue into the point that I had no idea how to connect.
Okay, good. Take it.
So there's a really interesting just bullet point at the bottom of the page It's a quote from the Journal of a Tour to the Hebrides? I don't know. It says...
Hebrides?
Hebrides? Sure. What is that?
Hebrides.
What is Hebrides?
I wasn't expecting a follow-up question.
Hebrides. Well, I look stupid, and I was able to bring you down with me. So it says, men know that women are an overmatch for them, and therefore they choose the weakest or the most ignorant. If they did not think so, they never could be afraid of women knowing as much as themselves. In justice to the sex, I think it but candid to acknowledge that in a subsequent conversation, he told me that he was serious in what he said. So he was just relaying what he heard.
I think I'm in agreement with that. I have often said men and women are exactly the same and exactly equal, but if there is a difference, it's probably because women are better.
But what he's saying is that, we are going to choose the ones who are wanting to be controlled or allowing us to control them.
Yeah.
Because then we can keep our power.
Yes. I would say that's
Yeah.
probably true.
But
Historically.
it is because, again, they're saying, like, yeah, women would have a lot of power otherwise. But we see this again in all the classics. Like, any of Aristophanes' plays, like, the women tend to have a lot of control, at least the ones focused on the women. And it does seem to have, although maybe somewhat satirical ideas, we talked about them potentially still being heroines.
Yeah.
Because that was something that we discussed in class. Can we call, like, who is it?
The one, the workshop, the lecture that we went to.
Yeah.
I can't remember now.
I can't remember the Aristophanes play is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But anyway, about her being a potential heroine, even though, like, it is a comedy. It's like, it does seem to be possible.
Yeah. I think I would agree with that, and you still see it today. Like, people typically, guys tend to go for this idea, like guys liking younger girls and like less mature, less experienced,
submissive.
Girls. It's the submissive and the control and everything. It's still very, very prevalent.
Dating people 8-10 years younger than them.
Or... That's whatever. We don't need to get into all that, but. The book's saying a lot of important things, I guess.
Yes. Those were the top, I think, like 8 bits from the book that I really, really wanted to point out. And so that was, like 8 of the 123 pages.
Wow, okay.
Already a good percentage
Good.
it. But loved it. Absolutely recommend it.
Cool. So we give it a yeah.
Yeah. I can't call it... I can't call it proto-feminist because it does seem to be still like feminist at the time, but it is very much what is the word? Cornerstone of feminism.
Yeah,
for that era.
Good.
Yeah,
fantastic. And you'd presumably recommend it.
You played the yeah, right?
I guess that's a different question. Was it good, and would you tell other people to go and read it?
Oh yeah.
So
I would say go and read it. I feel like I've covered a lot of it, but. There's always going to be more to learn from this book, I feel like.
Okay.
Like, I could read it again and learn more.
Okay, good.